They called him the Beloved, a golden dawn for a kingdom weary of war. But the weight of a crown is more than gold. It is the weight of a nation's fears and 1,000 years of blood. While Paris thrived, whispers of dissent and forgotten prophecies began to stir within the ancient stones of the Louvre. The scholars spoke of ancient curses, of minds unmade by divine displeasure or the touch of the Fae. He sought answers in stars and scripture, but found only echoes of his own deepening despair. He watched the spectacle of war and sport, yet his own inner world was fracturing, piece by agonizing piece. The tremors started in his hands, then in his mind. A king's grip, once firm, now faltered. Whispers grew louder of erratic behavior, of a king lost in his own labyrinthine thoughts. He would forget names, faces, the very purpose of his being, leaving his court adrift in uncertainty. Then came the visions, spirits, demons, the fabric of reality fraying before his very eyes. He believed he was not the king, but a commoner, a peasant, perhaps even made of glass. The Glass King, they called him in hushed tones, fearing he would shatter with a mere touch. His family, once united, now fractured under the sin of his failing kingdom, leaderless, descended into bitter feuds, a prelude to a greater, devastating war. Moments of lucidity were brief, like fleeting sunbeams through a storm-tossed sky, only to be swallowed by the darkness. Paranoia became his constant companion, twisting every act of kindness into a perceived threat. He was present, yet absent, a ghost in his own court. Decisions of state, once his sole purview, were now made by regents and ambitious rivals. While England pressed its claims, France bled, its king lost in his own private war. Time itself seemed to slow, distort, becoming meaningless to the man who forgot his own legacy. There were moments, fleeting and fragile. His children, though burdened by his madness, still held glimmers of affection for the king they barely knew. The memory of the beloved king faded, replaced by the legend of the madman. History would record his reign as a tragedy, a chilling reminder of power's fragility. But the kingdom he left behind was anything but peaceful, torn between ambitious dukes and foreign rivals. The ancient stones bore witness to the tragedy, the shame, and the coming English shadow. The son inherited not a kingdom, but a wreckage, and a crown tainted by madness. The very symbol of his divine right had been soiled by his delirium. The flashes of his madness, the dance of the burning men, a feast of horror he hosted for himself. He had to be physically restrained, beaten into submission, his kingship stripped by his own hand. The cures were desperate, the methods medieval. They tried everything but the one thing he needed: peace. The horror was not what he saw, but the fact that no one else could see it.
He was utterly alone.
He demanded darkness, silence, a retreat.
His world shrank to simple, obsessive rituals, counting, stacking, an attempt to impose order on chaos.
He lost his memory, his self, his very sense of identity as the King of France.
The kingdom was left in the charge of a chair, waiting for the return of a mind that would never fully heal.
His son watched, learning a lesson more brutal than any battle, the ultimate danger of the mind's betrayal. The king had been unlocked from his torment, but the keys to France's stability remained lost.
Faith, honor, loyalty, all became currency in the market of ambition that followed his death.
The only rule that held was fear, the only certainty, the endless, grinding cycle of retribution. In his final lucid moments, he may have signed away his kingdom, legitimizing the foreign invader.
To Charles.
The physical symbols of power passed quickly into the wrong hands, cementing the disaster. The smallest actions of a king can lead to oceans of spilled blood. France would survive, as the land always does, but the wounds of the Mad King's reign would take centuries to heal.
The breaking point. A blazing summer ride through the forest of Le Mans.
A sudden delusion, a feverish conviction that his own retinue were enemies, come to murder him.
When the frenzy subsided, he returned to vacant silence, unable to comprehend the carnage he created.
The fire of his youth was the spark. The heat of the sun and the fever of the road was the bellows.
Alliances shifted, duty dissolved. The king's collapse was the kingdom's total reorganization.
During the worst fits, he would refuse to change clothes for months, convinced his body was fragile, made of glass.
He had forgotten his crown, his queen, his name.
Forms of respect were maintained, even for a presence that was no longer there. The animals, perhaps, were the only ones who saw the man beneath the madness, offering silent, unwavering loyalty.
But the beautiful memory always shattered, replaced by the Glass King's paralyzing fear.
The world became too loud, too bright. His keepers had to dampen.
He rejected the symbols of his power, finding them to be the source of his torment. The mood of the king became the mood of the realm, shrouded in perpetual, cold uncertainty.
The king's illness was their weapon, the final prefect for civil war.
Patience was a luxury they could no longer afford. The struggle for the regency was a death match.
The disputes of dukes were decided not in council, but in the dark alleys of Paris.
Louis, confident in his power, oblivious to the knife that awaited him.
A brutal ambush. The streets ran red with the blood of the king's own brother.
The king was mad, but the true madness of France began with the murder of Orléans.
The killer stood revealed, and the civil war of the Armagnacs and Burgundians was ignited.
While his kin butchered each other, the King of France hummed to himself, protected by the shield of his insanity. The kingdom's failure to govern itself culminated in the fields of Agincourt.
The flower of French chivalry, left to rot in the mud. A sacrifice to a mad king's memory.
He was raised for glory, but destined for tragedy. The seeds of his sorrow were planted long before.
His whisperings were the true, untold history of his reign, lost forever.
He found comfort in inanimate objects, loyal where men were treacherous, silent where the world was screaming. He was both a king and a perpetual prisoner, guarded from others and from himself. The king's queen became the enemy's ally, signing the soul of France away for self-preservation. The king's daughter was pledged to the English king, ensuring the collapse of the Valois dynasty.
The true Dauphin, disinherited by his own mother, fled south to reclaim a shattered throne.
In his own private world, the war raged far away. He enjoyed
The only wounds that healed quickly were those of the flesh. The mind scars were eternal.
He was most content when he forgot the king, finding respite in the identity of the forgotten man.
The lineage of France found a tragic, silent end, a legacy too terrible to be painted.
France wept, not with sound, but with the eternal coldness of stone and the silence of forgotten prayers.
The foreign king walked into the home of the Valois, claiming the right that madness had forfeited. He saw a crown, not a nation, a prize, not a people. The Mad King offered no resistance, only vacant hospitality to the man who stole his son's future. The simple, quiet loyalty to a toy was his only anchor in a storm of high treason. A foreign child was crowned in Paris, the ultimate humiliation for the line of Capet.
The men who carved up the realm soon realized the terrifying cost of their ambition.
A memory of brotherhood before the crown and the madness defiled them.
Clarity was a torture. He knew his world was lost, but could do nothing to save it.
The symbol of France, fading, fraying, barely held together by a few threads of loyalty. His final view was a kingdom divided, an unnatural union built on his broken mind. The inner fire that had tormented him was finally burning out. The end was near. The king had forgotten everything, and in doing so, he finally forgave himself. He passed not as a monarch, but as a quiet, simple man, the true identity he sought. The instruments of power remained, but the soul of the kingship was departed. They mourned not the man, but the end of an era, the true close of France's long peace.
The funeral was a pageant, a last act of the king that everyone remembered.
But the legacy of a king is not found in his coffin, but in the resolve of his successor.
The wars were not over, they had merely changed masters. The fight for France was only just beginning.
Paris, the city he ruled, stood waiting for a king who would remember his duty. Charles the Beloved, Charles the Mad, reorganization epitaphs for one tragic life.
He started in light, descended into darkness, and left us.
The weight of the kingdom, too heavy for one man, finally settled on the dust of the forgotten.
His life was a flame that illuminated a great darkness, only to be consumed by it. The only true evidence of his suffering was the mark left on an innocent thing. The king who forgot he was king was finally, truly gone. But the silence he left behind would take a century of bloodshed to fill.